I just want to make sure my phone is off forever because I only want you in my head.
I'm just going to clip that out. And that's going to be
that'll be the whole thing. I only want you in my head.
As a broadcast journalist, I've spent my life traveling the world and made my living interviewing the greatest fighters of all time. When boxing shut down, I finally had a chance to look around this world of conflict and could see the fight in everyone. Until this day, I talk to the greatest fighters and thinkers of our time about their fight. On Luminary, I'm Radio Rahim, till this day. May 29th, 2021, I sat down with Bob Saget. He drew me into a conversation when I had every intention of performing an interview. He had that way about him. He could throw everything you intended to do out the window simply by reminding you to stay in the moment. So out of respect for our friend Bob, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna stay in the moment. Because if we're here with him, then he's still here with us. Chapter 1, right here, right now.
I'm proud of myself because I'm onto a new thing. At 65, I'm different than I was. Yeah, we're all rethinking what we said 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 4 years ago. I'm not even rethinking it. I just don't have the same way of doing humor or conversation. I guess therapy, having 3 kids, watching people pass away in the past few years, mortality, all that stuff has fortunately changed me to, my kids tell me, Dad, you're different. It's so nice to watch you grow.
At 65 is such a milestone. I hear more frequently than people having these epiphanies and understandings of life at 50. People are getting afraid at 50, and at 65 they're settling in and actually harnessing the wisdom.
I know a lot of people, and I know you do, that get afraid at 30. And I was loving getting into 30 because I didn't want to live in my 20s. I was so depressed. I was just working at the Comedy Store always, but I was hanging out with all geniuses who liked me. And I know it because I was in a Richard Pryor movie. Rodney Dangerfield put me in his first Young Comedian special. You know, all this shit happened, but I was really sad and on the road and went, why am I not on a sitcom? Why can't I get a movie career? And then I did a movie with Richard, and then that kind of gives you confidence, but then you get the uneducated view of life and think, I'm never going to work again, you know, as soon as you do a gig. And then I knew some people like Kevin Costner, we did The Groundlings together, and that's a workshop we paid to take. And he was cut out of the movie The Big Chill. He was in the coffin. They just show like his hand. And he was the friend. He was in all these flashbacks with all the stars of that very famous movie. And I said, weren't you depressed? He said, no, because I knew I was with the right people.
Being with the right people might be one of the most important aspects of life. The right people at the right time.
And it has to be the right time, because I've been with what people would think is the right people, and I didn't belong there. I was fairly close with Tom Hanks for many years. I used to do the warm-up on Bosom Buddies, audience warm-up.
No way.
True. And so I was invited years later to Tom's birthday party, and he'd already, won the Academy Award. And so I'm at his house for a party, and I ended up in a circle with
Steven Spielberg, Bruce Springsteen,
Tom Cruise, and Patty, Bruce's wife,
and Tom.
And then we had shots of tequila, and Michael Keaton ran over to me and said,
how the fuck are you standing in this group?
And I said,
I don't know, but I can't leave.
So Tom's talking about his private jet, and I didn't have a private jet, and Tom flies a private jet. And that's about being with what you would think is the right people, but it ain't the right time.
And oftentimes, there'll be those gatekeepers that are like, what the fuck are you doing here?
Which I was fine, because I'd already been on TV. My shows were in the top 10, but I'm here but that's the high school of show business. And that's you think you're accomplished if you know famous people. I was 20, 21. So I didn't know them. And now I stay away from people. I'm not a star fucker. I drop names a lot. I do that bad. I mean, I just did it. And I'm doubling down by dropping names of people that probably didn't want me in their circle. So that's even more self-deprecating.
But that is the high school society of Hollywood. And I realize it's not your resume that puts you in the group or makes you a part of these social groups that you're in. That shit is a product of who these people are at their core.
It's not connections.
It's who you are.
People always go, it's who you know. No, it's not. It's who you are. And are you connected with them like you would be with anyone else?
The kind of relationships that you have that allow you to put these benefits on and all that would make someone think, this guy must be third generation Hollywood. He must have grown up in a Hollywood family and have all these connections.
My dad was a meat executive with a supermarket company. We didn't have any money. I lived at home during college at Temple University, went to film school. And
What area did you grow up in?
I was born in Philly. At 4, I moved to Norfolk, Virginia. It was all because of my dad's supermarket chain was moving him around. And then I went to Encino, California, just to learn materialism when I was 14. I stayed there till 17. It was real hard. I didn't have any friends.
Okay, so forgive me for not doing the math myself, but the year, we're in the
71 to 74.
No, what year are you born?
56.
56, so...
That's when Columbus came over.
Yeah,
but the history we're not sure about.
And discovered the Sagets.
He decided that they all came to slaughter the American native. That's it.
I like that that's a punchline.
That's what we go. I just go dark, and then people don't expect it because I look like an accountant.
The world was so different then. And the reason I say people would think that you grew up in a Hollywood household is because you're so easy with it. I didn't know you personally all these decades, but like most, I knew of you, and you never were a rigid guy or never had any kind of issue racially.
I understand the issues, and they upset the hell out of me of what our world has always gone through and what humanity's always gone through. But I was not raised to see anything but people. I just know if someone's not nice to me, that's different. And in Norfolk, Virginia, kids would throw rocks at my head and call me a Jew, and they were just angry white kids.
How did your parents see it?
They threw rocks at my head also.
But that was to better you.
It bettered me and let me be a self-deprecating Jew. But my dad was very, I talked about it last night on stage here. My dad was very hurt by the situation of the world because there were segregated bathrooms and I was like 6 and 7, and it started to change as I got around 9 or 10. The United States seemed to open up a little. And I don't know, I didn't track the year, but I know it was after Kennedy was shot because I came home from school and they sent us home and my mom was ironing and crying and we're watching Walter Cronkite. And like you're saying, the world was different. It was 3 networks.
Right.
No Fox, there was 3.
How did you become aware of the world outside of your home and how that affected what was happening inside the home?
I think I was just different and I always saw things that way. So I was drawn to anything that took me out of the world. I would look at a lot of movies. All I did was watch movies. So when movies, any science fictions came out, I was right there. I was in the theater in my teens when Planet of the Apes came out with Charlton Heston, and I went,
that's what we're going to do to the planet.
We have to be very careful we don't drop the bomb. Because at the end, spoiler alert, Planet of the Apes, the original, they show the Statue of Liberty, and he goes, God damn it, you went and did it. And he said, God damn it, at the end of this movie, which is not something I say in my stand-up, you know. I would rather just use the normal ones that we're used to.
Because of the religious...
No, I just didn't feel... That's why I feel fortunate. If people have said things they try to cancel, you know, the Gen Z says they saw me on the Comedy Central roast from years back, and people were saying things about me, and because I laughed, they said that I'm guilty of what they said about me. Which is insane, because the things that I said were wicked. First thing, I would never say them today. If I said them today, I would definitely apologize, because that would be a huge mistake. So I feel people where it is. Turn on the news, I know what I'm not comfortable saying. I don't have to learn what words trigger people and what words hurt people. I know what they are.
Well, you learned how society hurts people when you were discussing segregated bathrooms. Did you see that kind of discrimination as a Jewish kid, or were you looking at that?
As a person, as a young person? I never thought of myself as a Jewish kid. I did it because I was supposed to get bar mitzvahed, because that's what you're supposed to do. And as I've gotten older, and I've gone to Israel, and I went with my ex-wife and her parents, and I went on a tour. Mostly, I went to the Dome of the Rock, which terribly unfortunate things happened this year there. The Old Testament says it's where Abraham was going to slay Isaac. Muhammad supposedly ascended to heaven from there. These are major things from this one place. And it's also, most importantly, in showbiz terms, it's where the Raiders of the Lost Ark, it's where the Ark of the Covenant was hidden from the Nazis, in this spot. When I went years ago, people were allowed to go in. There were people on the walls with machine guns, Palestinians, and then there were Israeli soldiers, but it was relatively peaceful because it's the Middle East, for God's sakes. And what's happening now is heartbreaking on every level, because I try to see things from every side that exists. And that, nonpartisan is just a foolish word. That's not, it needs to be said, but it's, for me, it's just about caring about all human beings.
Your parents were both professionals. Were they?
My mom was a prostitute, and my dad was in the meat business.
Yeah, well, that's the oldest profession, Bob.
It is, and the meat business kind of goes along with it metaphorically.
Depending on how you beat it.
You can't beat my dad's meat. You can beat his prices. But he was funny, too. He was very funny.
But in reality, obviously, your mother wasn't.
No, my mother was not a prostitute. She was the opposite. She was very puritanical, told me not to use bad language. And guess what that does to a kid who's already got that little wink in his eye of saying stuff against the grain? Just to wake people up, to have fun. Not to be a dirty little bastard, but just to have fun. And I was 9, and we had so many deaths growing up that my dad would just instill that in me. He didn't teach it to me. I just saw how he reacted. I mean, he buried 4 brothers and a sister in his life. He buried all his siblings. I helped him write the speech at 3:30 in the morning in Philly. And because of where I was in the world, I could just fly them in and out. I said, "It's going to be the shortest funeral of your life, Dad. You're 85, and I'm not putting you through this anymore." And his brother passed away, and he lived to about 78, which was longer than any of the others. They died at like 40, 37, really weird heart attacks. So I have a heart doctor as my GP. And my dad wrote a speech. We did it together. He never drinks. He had a martini with me. He's gone, but you talk present day on people when they're gone, and they were so close. And he gave the best speech. I gave him and he wrote it, but I just kind of moved things around like you do for people, especially when they're grieving. And his ending was something like, "I'll see you in 30 years, Joe." And it's good to close with something sweet that makes people feel the love.
When you started losing aunts and uncles, how old were you?
I guess it started when I was like 7, and then every 2 years somebody died. And I had a cousin die. She died at 23 of cancer after giving birth to her child. And then a lot of cousins went through a lot of hardship. So I was like 9, 10, 11, 12, 14. It was a lot. And then I lost both my sisters. So
it's difficult for anybody to deal with grief. At 7 years old, you lose a pet and you think the world is over.
Yeah.
And so when your parents are dealing with something that heavy, no matter how old you are as a kid, you recognize that they might need something from you. You talked about helping your dad write obituary or the speech. What was it like for you watching them go through that? And then how did you digest it yourself? How did you feel your role was in this whole thing?
Well, to be honest with you, at 9 years old, I picked up an 8mm camera and I just made projects. I shot all these terrible 8mm movies and put friends in them that I could find. I made friends by putting them in movies. So if I didn't have friends or a play date, I would just shoot movies every weekend when I wasn't doing school or mowing the lawn or whatever my chores were. I was a good kid, except for shoplifting, the usual stuff.
Those science fiction movies you were watching and movies I suppose you were shooting yourself, You talked about just wanting to escape, just wanting to get out.
And that's what movies do for us.
What was it that you were trying to escape?
Well, there's so much pain. And my parents couldn't deal with it. And every time they finally started to try to regroup, something else terrible happened. And then one of my sisters got this disease, scleroderma, in 1994. I was not really successful yet. It was like a year or two later that it started to happen for me. And then I made a TV movie about it in 96. So I think I was I was working with ABC, so they let me make this TV movie with Dana Delaney starring in it, kind of playing my sister, called For Hope. And scleroderma is this weird disease. So I've done over 30 years of benefits, and we've raised over $50 million for the Scleroderma Research Foundation. It affects mostly women, and you can die from your lungs, pulmonary hypertension. This is an autoimmune and vascular disease, but it's more prevalent than you would think. So it's one of my life's work, because my sister died at 47, that one.
Oh.
That's the best part about being an only child, man. You don't have to worry about losing a sibling.
Yeah, but you have a different relationship with loss altogether. And
what losses did you have?
Well, they all happened before I was able to understand what life was about, right? Like, as a single mom, not because she was divorced, but my father was murdered. But before I didn't
know that.
I was 2. So there's no concept of that, right? You just grow up in this situation. But everybody else seems to have a very different situation.
Yeah.
And I didn't lose any siblings, but I also didn't have any. So it's not a sense of loss so much as a sense of never having had the experience in the first place. I don't know which is worse or better, but they both leave a hole.
It's a vacuous hole, because your dad, I mean, you don't have memory really at 2. You got photos.
Right.
And
everybody else knew him, but you didn't. And they all want to tell you about him. And somehow you form this imagination in your mind.
And so they fill you with love about him.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But also the complexity.
But also their perception. And you don't get to counter that with your own, which is frustrating.
You have to put it all together like you're collecting evidence.
Right. And then make it work for you. Like, you're not going to put together something you don't want to have to live with. So who knows how accurate my perception is of what the man did or who he was, but I had to just fit the molding that I could accept. And so...
Hey, what are the circumstances? And I'm not going to ask you here. I know you've talked about it on here, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
You haven't?
No, because the show's not about me.
But I look at it as a discourse, though, no matter what.
People who have accomplished great things and are consistently reaching to do something else are fighting against a finality. That, like you say, oh, well, this could be my last job. Every job could be my last job.
Well, I don't have... I got rid of that. I do not possess that.
But you had it.
Oh, God, forever, for decades. But after going through 10,000 rejections, you kind of get it. It's like, next. I don't even let a rejection mean a thing. Everything I've had was an accident. It would be an incoming phone call to a manager who would call me and say, okay, they want you to replace a guy on Full House. They always wanted you. I got fired from a morning show, so I became available. So they reshot stuff to put me in it. And everything. Richard Pryor movie was just on an open audition. And the director, Michael Apted, had hired me. And then Richard and I knew each other from the Comedy Store. So they started writing more scenes for me because we hit it off and we were having fun. And everything in my career, hosting Saturday Night Live is one of the more fun things you can do. It just happens. You can try, but it's incoming is how things happen because the world perceives you a certain way.
All these things happen because you're available to do them and you are in people's consciousness.
And your energy comes out. And it is the popularity contest that is show business that you don't really think about because it's just because you're star rose at that time.
Some say pain is just weakness leaving the body, but we often forget what it does to the mind. Chapter 2, not just America's dad. Show business, in a way, started as your escape from things, escape from pain.
Yeah.
And at some point, that turned into ambition
Because I was rewarded. I did some radio contest at 17 where I was a 17-year-old with a guitar who sang a song about bondage. Now,
What the hell's that guy?
Who is that kid?
and I won $500 from WMMR in Philadelphia. And then I went to New York and I waited in line at Catch a Rising Star in the Improv for 12 hours, signed a sheet, did all of it, did everything that people do the hard way.
When you started making these movies with your friends and getting probably some adulation from your peer group,
Yeah.
was that the first reward? Like figuring out that doing that kind of thing can win you friends?
That was a reward of it, not unlike what showbiz actually is. The reward for me was by doing it so much, I figured out how to do it. And then I would pretend it looked like I was coming out of a window, and then I was able to do a swish pan, and with an edit, I'm laying on the ground, and I got fake blood coming out of my head, and I'm 10. And I watch it, and I edit it with a razor blade and tape, and I realized I did this well. You know, that looked good. And I showed it to people and my family, and they went, that was really good. And I never thought I'd do it for a living. And then I did improv in college. Even though I went to Temple, I did improv with groups at University of Pennsylvania because that's where the comedy was. And I did stand-up. I started putting an act together.
Did your family or your parents support you early in life, chasing after a career in entertainment?
My dad was a working man. So my dad supported me because he loved me so much. And I was his son, and his daughters had a harder go than I did. But mine was psychological. And my mom thought from the moment I was born that I was, the chosen one. She just knew that I was different. And also she had twins that passed away 2 years before I was born because the hospital had dysentery and like 12 babies died. They didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell the parents. Hospital closed. My parents didn't sue, but the other parents did. The boy was born to the day that I was born 2 years earlier, and his name was also Robert. So they just thought I was the second coming. They really did. My mother did. So it was a very special thing that Bob can do anything he wants. They didn't have a lot of money, but I got into USC Film Grad School, and I had won the student Oscar for a documentary I made at Temple University. And then I quit that to go to the Comedy Store because the owner, Mitzi, said,
You should work here.
and then all of a sudden, Richard and Robin were coming up to me, and Michael Keaton and Billy Crystal, and telling me I was funny. And I was like, I was told to be a comedian by people that I looked up to, that I understood. I understood them.
That's a very unusual story, actually, from the parental aspect, in that your mother believed you could do anything and Bob can do everything, and your
Right.
father was very supportive. Did that actually penetrate your own insecurities and give you some confidence that, hey, maybe I can do anything?
I went from extreme insecurity, and still do sometimes, not as bad. I'm pretty much more zen about it all because of work I've done on myself, to ego. And there's nothing more unattractive than a teenager with a big ego, or a kid in their early 20s with a big ego. It's pretty unattractive. In myself, I found it unattractive.
Ego in a early 20s kid with talent, it still usually masks a real fear. It's the puffed up.
It compensates.
It compensates for what they feel like their deficiencies might be. So you focus on what you think you're good at and make that what people see in you and make that your entire identity.
And I kind of believe that the ego is as big as the insecurity. So
Absolutely. Because it has to cover it.
But everything's got an equal balance. That's what's complicated with someone who's both good and goes to the dark side in their life, who is a good person, but has also done some treacherous things. That's the hardest part, unless they're really dumb and treacherous. And ignorance and evil are not a good combination.
Early in life, you have to wrestle with your own definition of these things, evil and good and bad, and what's
Right.
acceptable and,
And
what you get away
how
with.
do you put it in a religious context, or is
Right.
it just that's bad energy, that's good energy,
And you talked about so many people in your family having physical issues, but yours was mental.
And I had a sister who was schizophrenic who died at 34 of a brain aneurysm. So there were a lot of mental problems in my family also.
What did you feel like was your hurdle in that regard?
I went through it. I would have been medicated in today's world in my 20s for extreme depression, like carrying it around all the time.
I didn't deal with that kind of depression. It was like rage for me, right?
You were angry.
Yeah, but I didn't know I was angry. I thought I had a reason to be upset.
Would you choose fights with people?
No, in fact, and that's what I mean. Like, I'm not an aggressive person or a bully by any stretch of the imagination, but the problem with society is that I am so even tone and so easy to get along with, but there's no yellow light. So
right. I do that.
But it took me well into my 20s, maybe 26 if I would pinpoint it, for that to become something I was aware of as, I'm the problem. Oh, I see.
But you're one of them. You're in reaction to a lot of things that you feel are unjust or getting aggression at you.
But having cause does not justify the effect in all cases, right? And that was my whole thing as a teenager or whatnot. Like, I have a cause. Right. So my natural reaction is the just reaction. And even though you're not dealing with rage, I wonder if your feeling of depression or sadness, which based on the kind of loss that you experience and the grief that you had to have been wrestling with, is understandable.
It is, but I would also act out, and I had a very bad temper, and I would yell. Never hit anybody, but I would yell. And it was upsetting to do that. And I would do it in relationships. I did it with my ex-wife. I've done it in almost every relationship I've been in where I've slipped. And sometimes alcohol will add to that. I'm still working on the anger management sometimes, but I can get out of it very quickly. Like my wife will say, don't start this. Do you hear yourself? And the worst is a text argument. If you're using Siri, it's like,
what do you mean you want to whack me with a paddle on my nobula?
You know, it's like none of the words are right. My wife and I have some different viewpoints of things, and we have conversations about them. And sometimes it's best not to have a conversation about them. But I respect her a lot, and I understand where she's coming from, and she respects me a lot. And I think we've affected each other a little bit healthily. But my own daughters are the ones that I care the most about and want to hear where they're coming from, want to hear what they're thinking. I've had many different cathartic moments. One of the hardest things I ever went through, even with all the deaths, was being divorced. So that was around 42. And the Motorcycle's Guide to the Galaxy says the secret to life is 42. Something happens at 42. And I do think that was around the time. We all have many poignant moments, and they do seem to have an age tag on them. 50 is a big one. 60 hit me very hard, but a friend of mine threw a big party for me that I didn't expect it to be. It was Stamos. And I found out how much love that I had given to receive so much love from people. So that was the time, I think, at about 60, maybe in my late 50s. And this isn't without other hardships that were happening at the same time, just personal things. But I really started to go, you mean something. You know, it's like It's a Wonderful Life when George Bailey, James Stewart, that's a movie, everybody, he wants to kill himself. The movie starts, he's on a bridge. He's going to kill himself. And then an angel takes him through his life and shows him what would have happened had he not existed. And I know for a fact that I have helped people. I know that I have given a lot of love to people because I have a lot. I have an extreme amount. I was raised with it. It's what helped me to survive and stay sane. It's what helped me not let myself die. I'd be on a plane and didn't care if it went down. And then I looked around and went,
they don't look happy either, so it'll be fine.
That's a comic thinking joke. And then doing this stuff for people with all the philanthropic stuff I can do. And people thank me for helping them further the research for scleroderma to try to save people's lives. We can't save people, but we can sure help to try to facilitate it. And mental health is a big thing I'm getting more involved in now to try to put my name on it and help people because I've had it in my life for so long.
What's the work that you had to do to love yourself?
I think a lot of it, truthfully, for me, was therapy. I have an amazing therapist who I got to about 8 years ago, 10 years ago, after two friends who I didn't know both went to this doctor, recommended this doctor, and they begged me to go. Begged me because they couldn't take me anymore. And I was ranting, complaining, nonstop talking. To be able to get to a place where I'm content in the moment has been a lifelong exercise, and I'm kind of there. Not always, but for the most part, I am. I just want to be in this moment. I want to be right now. And I'm much happier. I can sleep better, which has always been a major issue for me, for the active mind. And a lot of it's neurotic worrying. And I don't like being neurotic. And I don't think I'm comedically neurotic at times, but that's just mild insecurity. I'm not neurotic like I was. Neurosis, some people say, don't make fun of it. It's just self-examination. But it's bad if it becomes that habit that makes you go, I'm not good enough. This isn't, you just cock-block your life with it. But not if you're analyzing it and using it to write something. Or acting. Acting is completely in the moment. I love acting. I love directing because your mind never stops. You have to do it. Every department of creativity is involved in directing. You're dealing with writing, acting, music, photography. I mean, literally every department is an artistic dream. But work does channel a lot of us and gives us meaning.
You've done so many things that are awe-inspiring. The philanthropy might get the least amount of attention outside of the entertainment world. People who don't know. When was that seed planted?
I was on a morning show, and the person with scleroderma, Sharon Monsky, founded the organization. It's a disfiguring disease sometimes for people, and she was obviously a victim of this terrible disease. So she asked me to do it. And so I did this benefit, and then I hosted it the next year. This is like in the early 80s. And then a year later, my sister was diagnosed with that disease. And we didn't know what it was, and they were misdiagnosing her and guinea pigging her. And then she came out to LA, and I did the benefit for like a third time or fourth time as a host. And then I did it the next year, and she had gone. She died. And so that was that. I had a dear friend who ran the foundation that I fell in love with as a person, as a friend, and her husband and her kids. They're like family now. And my sister was gone, and she was in the audience the year before. So there's nothing that drives you more. And then I met people and became friends with people with the disease, and you'll be surprised how many people you would know that have this disease. Mostly women in the childbearing years, and disproportionately people of African descent have a more progressive version of it.
You described the moment in which you were asked to, or at least got involved in participating in this, but I dare say that that's probably not where the seed was planted. I remember you talking about your other sister and losing her, and I felt like you wanted to help. I remember wanting to help as a kid.
I didn't feel big enough.
Not being able to. So
what did you want to help?
Well, I had a single mom. I wanted to help make money. I wanted to help level our lives. I wanted to help make it easier for her. I had friends who had way more financial strains than I did in my household, simply because they did have siblings, even with a father in the home. It's difficult for them to buy shoes or to have that extra bag of chips or to go to the movies on Saturday. And they had real struggles financially that I didn't have. And I wanted to help. I wanted to impact the things that were out of my control. And it felt, about people I care about, so unfair that so much was in my control, in my environment, and it seemed that it wasn't in theirs, and I couldn't understand why me, not them.
Right.
I sensed that in you, but in you, it was met with tragic experiences. Like these things I'm feeling, I don't think were as profound because I wasn't losing people in the way that you were. I wasn't having to help my mom through the kind of grief that you helped your parents through. And when that seed was planted for you, I think that is what has inspired you to really help, not just in this particular cause, but you do a lot.
I try. But to your point first, people have different frames of reference. And people I know, my God, I lost my grandmother and my dog in the same year. And I'm like, I'm sorry. How old was she? She was 92. But it doesn't mean you don't love anybody any less. The loss isn't any different. 92, love is love. But then I'm thinking, some people, if they were me, would be like a jerk about it. Well, I've lost 20 people, and name a disease. I've had everything. I got it, and car accident, and my leg doesn't work. But everybody, I guess it was David Mamet who said it, but I'm sure Shakespeare probably said it. We play the cards we are dealt. So what happened to your dog and your grandmother, and that's all that has happened, so lucky for that person, is just as severe in their frame of reference and just as heavy. So I'm saying there is an equality to it, even though some people would go, oh, come on. I watched heads get blown off. I was in that shooting. I mean, it's horrific things that happen, as opposed to your grandmother and your dog. But not to diminish it. And then I was diminishing it for years. And I don't anymore, because pain is pain. People's pain is their pain. You don't get over wading through a bunch of bloody bodies. It takes years to figure that out. And you survived. And how did you survive? Can you walk? Is your brain working? But to the point of what my therapist taught me, which I think answers the question of what you're saying, all the seeds I've planted, all the heartache I gave myself over what accomplishments I didn't make. Why can't I pick up the phone and just get this made? Why isn't this person calling to do this with me? And then my therapist said something very intelligent, which was, what are the things you do best in your life? And I said, well, my kids. I'd like to think my kids, not that they haven't had their difficulties, but I'd like to think that's one of the things that I do the highest in my life, because they mean the world to me. And I know I'm a good dad by seeing what women they've become and how they've dealt and are still dealing with struggles, how they're able to do that. That means their mom and I did something great. And they are, to me, one of the highlights and stars of my life. And my doctor said, well, what you want to do is approach your whole life like that.
Some of the things in this chapter are hard to hear, but even harder to say. Chapter 3, just Bob.
When you're 65, then I was sitting with Wilbur smoking a cigar, and I said, I haven't even done. I said, I'm about to be 65, and I haven't even done what I came here to do. And Bill looked at me in the eyes, and he said, well, you better fucking hurry up. So there is a little bit of a time clock going.
I hear in your description of what's going on with you and has over the course of your career, the absence of that 20-something kid's ego and not acknowledging that you are timeless in the sense that over all these generations and iterations of entertainment and time, you've remained relevant. You're there, and not as a memory, but you're just Bob.
But not in all parts of the world. Some people never. But 4-year-olds are watching Full House now everywhere, so they're going, "Oh, it's Bob Saget."
The world.
I'm like, what the hell?
The world's so much smaller than when that show debuted.
Yeah,
that's the point. Yeah, all
but most
parts
shows
of the world
don't last. Seinfeld and Friends will always last, but a kid show. The Brady Bunch isn't on, really, unless you go
Bob,
to TV Land.
Most people don't last. And you have, but you haven't just hung on. You've remained relevant, and you've remained Bob. That is watching those seeds sprout all along the way. I mentioned that people may consider it sad that my career is my life driving force. That's because there's a lot of sacrifices along the way. I don't have a family, and I'm not married.
But you're young. I look at you and see only a younger person with the future completely ahead of you, because it takes the hurt to have the chops. You can't be really great without life experience, and it can be the lowest of lows. See, I think I'm just starting, and that is, I guess, what relevance comes from.
Right.
I actually believe I'm just starting, because I haven't made a movie that I feel hit everybody. And I want to do a couple of those. And that's, some people spend their whole life doing many movies. There's these amazing directors. We all love them. We all respect them. I adore them. They're the top of the mountain. I want to do a couple of those movies. I know I have it in me. It's a question of, like Bill Burr said, you better fucking hurry up.
Well, you took on a lot more responsibility for other people in your personal life than I did along the way. And you're also dealing with your own upbringing and wanting to help others. All the things that you've described as driving you, how difficult was it at the time, if you recognize, to be so much to so many people, and then the people who are around you in your nucleus sometimes don't get that from you that you're giving to the world?
I have guilt involved with that in the past. With my kids, I feel I was working so hard and so much that even though I saw them all the time, we got divorced, my ex-wife and I, when they were 4, 7, and 9. So that's crucial and difficult. When I was with them, it was 1,000,000,000% with them. But I was sad. Divorce is sad. And so they went through a sad time. So we went through it together. And they did it at 2 different homes. So there's a lot of people that can relate to that, no matter what your income. So those are things that I would correct now. But I am also at a place in my life where I'm much more engaged. While I've been here, I've been dealing with a lot of stuff with my kids and talking to one of them's at my house. Is the alarm set? I call her constantly to see where she is. She's 32. She really doesn't need my help, but she does. She does. She's my kid. So it never stops. That'll never stop.
Having raised daughters,
right?
You had sisters, no brother. Save your father, you seem to be the central male figure running throughout your life and all these women. What's it like to have daughters growing up in such a different environment than you did?
Right.
And trying to shelter them, not shelter is maybe not the right word, but protect them maybe from the pain that you experienced.
It's hard to protect them because they have to go through it. And I just found out some things about one of my daughters the other night that I never knew. A couple things, poignant things that I'd like to talk about right now. But that it made me go, wow. So was I? And then she said, it's not your fault because you were always asking me. I just didn't volunteer the information. And she went through stuff, and I knew she was going through stuff. And she's solid as a rock. She's amazing. All of them are. All of them. They all face their own challenges, as everybody does. I've been surrounded by women my whole life. My mother was a giant influence, huge. And to be around, it was mostly male when I came out to LA in 1978. There were women comedians that I looked up to, Elaine Boozler and Shirley Hemphill, and a lot of people at the Comedy Store that I just thought were the shit, Lily Tomlin and people that I was just in adoration of. But it was a very strong male group. I didn't have brothers. I had cousins, but I wasn't that. I'm closer with them now than I was then. So here I was living at home and never went to camp and never hung out with a lot of guys like that because I wasn't on sports teams. I would move. I was kind of a spaz. I wasn't too good. I quit USC grad school for film and just worked at the Comedy Store. And then all these guys, they're like me. Oh, wait a minute. I'm like them. Wow, that's why I've been talking so fast all these years. That's why my synapses are quick. That's why I say this. That's why, oh, wait, I'm stupid. I don't know what they're talking about. Wow, they're a genius. How can Richard be so honest? How is that possible? Greatness is something that's such a gift to be able to be around.
Where and in what ways do you see that in your daughters? They're actually a part of you.
They're a huge part of me, and they have it.
Mm.
They have it.
Describe
they all
that.
have it. With the struggles, when one is struggling, I'm able to lock eyes, and we're able to be at the same place at the same moment because I get them. I know what they're going through now. That's the other advantage of getting older. I don't really ever want to die, so I got to do what a lot of people do, which is live really long.
Is there one aspect of your creativity or what you offer the world that you would like to be identified with to a future generation?
I think the hardest thing for me is that people, they don't see many angles. Oh, I can't believe you were that clean father on the show and the host of that, and then you're so dirty. And it's like, I'm not dirtier than anybody else. So maybe what they'll be saying is,
You were one of the few people that was able to do a very long transition.
from being what people thought was a squeaky clean person, which I wanted to be. You know, those shows was a kid show. I know how to do a kid show. I could do one now. And I wouldn't have a sly look in my eyes like I'm doing something evil. Like, oh my God, the joke's on them. It wasn't like that. I played that character. I didn't have any problem playing him again. When Netflix did it for 6 years, that wasn't hard. It was just the character. People can't get their hands around that. Or hosting something and knowing you can't curse because it's Sunday night at 7 o'clock. People went to church that day. What the hell am I going to do on there? I'm not even going to say hell. But then to have the freedom, and that's what I love about stand-up, is the freedom to do what I want to do. That's my playtime. That's my time to share something. And you get laughs. I mean, I walked out 2 nights ago to a standing ovation after kind of a personal thing on my phone blowing up that was pretty upsetting, personal. But then I come out and they stand up, and I'm like, oh, all that love just made me want to play. And everything else went out the window, and that's what being in the moment is. And that's what performing is, and that's what writing is, and that's what anything anyone does. Being a damn gymnast, being the greatest athlete, you know, doing what you do. If you're not in the moment, you can't do what you do. It's just being in the moment.
I'm happy to have heard you say that because I must admit that was my answer for you. I feel like I may be not too far behind you, but I'm younger than you and remember these shows that you made iconic. And I remember them being a child watching them.
Mm-hmm.
And now growing up in the business, having the great honor to call you a friend and understanding life and people from a different perspective. One thing that has been consistent about you before I knew you, when I met you, and since then, is that you are that honestly good guy. You're that clean person. Not
so
that
why
you
do they
can't
want to
curse and this and
cancel
that.
me? They don't know
Nobody
it.
wants to cancel you. Nobody wants to cancel you.
Gen Z thinks the roast is the news.
But as a professional, as a comedian, as an actor, as a director, as a creator, you've imagined and been able to perform in a way that is cleaner than most. And it doesn't seem forced or like you're holding something back that you'd rather be saying, or it doesn't seem like you don't have the guts to do this or that, which is what a lot of young comics and edgy guys, as they would call themselves, would say, well, that guy doesn't have the fucking balls to say this or talk that way.
In 2007, I turned that upside down. So it took me a few years to get out of that filth tunnel that I was in. I was in Aristocrats.
It's my favorite.
Thanks, because it's blue as hell. And I said fuck like it was a rim shot, you know? It was.
But the reason it was my favorite is because I saw that as like a performance that was also genuine in its inception. We weren't doing a shtick, if I could be more articulate about it.
No, it was who I was and where I was.
Exactly.
And I was performing at NYU for 20-year-olds.
That's the honesty. That's the part that makes everything about Bob. Well, I'm just Bob. Because just being Bob, just being who you are is so unique in this business.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you.
And that's the thing that keeps you relevant, keeps you tied to our hearts, makes you always approachable. The fact that you're taking your time to sit here and have this discussion with me, never for a moment did I feel like I was burdening you or
not at all.
Tethering you to something you didn't really want to do.
I can't wait to take Imodium, but otherwise. My mother's voice was like,
Bobby, you can do anything.
And it was like Anthony Perkins' mom in Psycho. It became, I still hear her voice. And she would say,
I'm going to come back as a dove.
She told me this before she passed away.
You'll see a dove and it'll be me.
And I was like, well, what if I'm on my honeymooners?
I'll be there.
And the reason she was in hospice and she was looking at a bar of Dove soap. So she thought, that's where she thought of it. She was doing improv, hospice, and she loved Dove because it made her skin so silky and bright white like a dove. She looked like a Quaker. And I was on my honeymoon. We were in Paris, and a dove flew onto the windowsill. And then I literally thought in my brain, it was saying, "Hello, Bobby. Told you I'd be here. I'll be with you forever." And then I'm in a car, and she's like in the back seat, a dove, talking dove. "Make a left. Take me to CVS." And then it goes further into the things she needs. So that's the comedy version of my mom, who went out of this earth like I've never seen anyone go out. All my friends, she was only 89. She decided she didn't want to get chemo or radiation. And all my friends were visiting her, and she was telling them it's going to be okay. Life's going to be okay. And John Stamos took pictures of her, and all of the pictures, I'm not kidding, had a halo around her head. And there was no halo lighting. There was no directional pin spot quartz light from the ceiling. It was just a bland fluorescent bar solid hospital light over her bed. She just wanted to see everybody. And she lived on no food or water for 3 weeks. And it was until 3 days before she passed that she was still lucid. And people, they were in a holy space when they came to say goodbye to her. And they walked out of the room devastated because everybody said, "I've never seen anything like that." And that was the gift that my mother gave me. All the hardship she gave me, and she was difficult, overly protective of me. I don't know why, maybe because she lost 4 kids, but she was overly protective. And I didn't really have a life till I became 22 and went to be with comedians. So comedians are my chosen herd. That's my group. And my dad was very funny and lovely also. So, but it was harder. His leaving was, usually it doesn't go like my mom. People leaving is not good.
When you look at your own daughters, do you see your reflection in them?
Oh, 100%. One of them looks exactly like me, and she looks exactly like my mom. My other 2 are just beautiful and just figuring out life in different ways because they're completely different. All 3 of them are completely different. And everybody struggles with different stuff. And they're my heart. And my wife is pretty amazing. It's been 5 years we've been together. And I was divorced 25 years ago or something. So I had a couple girlfriends, and that's how life goes. And that's more than a couple. I mean, it's 25 years, for God's sakes. It was 20 years, then, if you do the math, because I met my wife. But this is a really good time in my life. So,
what do you think your voice sounds like
it's so
in the
funny.
head of your daughters?
This voice right now, the one I'm talking with.
No, the one you hear your mom's voice in the back of your head, but less the voice and more the content. You hear your mother telling you, "Bob, you can do anything."
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, the inspiration that both my parents instilled in me, I pass on to everyone that I come in contact with, and especially my daughters and my wife and my nephew and people that I love and friends, because friends will call me, and I wanted to be a doctor, but I just can't do math or science. I was pre-med for 6 months and then went to the film department.
But you can cut up a carcass.
Oh, man, I can fillet anything. I could cut meat like Hannibal Lecter. I could do it up. I know I can debone a fish, and you would not know that it's not together as a solid piece. Just you lift the skin up, and it's nothing but meat.
Now, that might be your father.
Well, yes, because he got me the job, and I almost got fired a lot because I did some terrible things. But
Hold on, no, everybody might not know the job.
Okay, I was a deli clerk, a seafood manager, and I cut some meat in supermarkets, mainly one in Cedarbrook Mall in Wyncote, Pennsylvania, in Philly, outskirts of Philly. And I was very good at it, but I was obnoxious, and they wanted to fire me, but I worked hard. So I can clean 100 pounds of fish in an hour right now. I could take a deli scale apart right now, be very careful not to cut myself. Probably better than I was when I was young because I cut myself. And and you know this because we talked, I'm on a leave of absence from the Amalgamated Meat Cutters Union.
That's it.
So I am in Directors Guild, Writers Guild, Screen Actors Guild. I'm in literally almost every guild in show business, but I am.
You can also make an honest living.
I could open a deli or a meat department, and I could have a job.
You talk about your mom so much and impart that to future generations, everybody you meet and everything, but that genuine work-a-day, honest living.
That was my dad really instilled. He worked nonstop. I worked nonstop.
Right. And I see that in you. And every boy loves his mom, and, your relationship with your dad is different by definition. And the fact that you had him in your life and you're still in that union is a tethering to that dad in you.
He also right now would be smiling very much that we're discussing this. He'd be very, very happy that I'm discussing him and that union.
What's his spirit like and the influence in your life that maybe you're not always thinking about or conscious of, but you must know is there? How did that become a part of you?
That's why I was good on Full House. I wanted to play that part. I knew I was the Richie Cunningham of the show. It had the same producers as Happy Days. And Stamos was Fonzie, so I was there to sit down and give the lectures or just talk to my kids about how you get through life, And sometimes I'll do it with my own kids. They'll be in their room and I'll sit down on the bed and start talking. And where's the synthesizer music, But what my dad instilled, I'll just give you a quick example. Well, we went to see my great uncle who passed away, and he was in the hospital. He had a heart attack. And I'm in an elevator with my dad, and this lady is in there crying. We didn't know her. We're at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in L.A. It's a long time ago, probably 20 years ago. And my dad sees her crying, and he looks over at her, and it's not unlike myself, where people, if you heard it out of context, you would think it was a lascivious thing to say. Instead of saying, I'm sorry, you're going through something, instead of saying the actual words, he said dialogue that was, the intent was, I hope you feel better. I'm sorry for whatever's going on. He said, has anyone told you that you look very nice today? And it sounds so creepy, right, if I say it? But it wasn't. The woman was crying. And he just didn't, he summoned up what words he thought made sense the most economically, because it's a short elevator ride. And she looked up at him like she'd just seen an angel. And she said, thank you very much. And he just kind of nodded and he teared up. All he was trying to do was find the words to say, I'm sorry you're hurting. But that's who he was. He wanted to make people feel better.
And so do you.
Yeah, I actually do.
How much of what you saw in your own household with your parents carry over into your marriages and the work that you had to do?
Well, the things I don't want to carry on from my parents' marriage, which is that Neil Simon dialogue where they finish each other's sentences and they become one person. It's like,
Why'd you say that?
I didn't say that. Why do you think I said that?
Well, I said it because
they have to repeat the handle on the
Why are you acting like that?
Why are you acting like that?
It's like, well, why do they have to do this play? It's a really bad neurotic play. Mm-hmm. And that's their interchange. And whenever I fall into that, I try to nip it in the bud and kill it right away, because those are patterns that you're not really having a conversation. You're just having a banter of bad habits. A lot of our conversation has been inspirational in its attempt. And in the subject matter, it's like, how did you deal with this? How did you get through depression? And I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm made of special metal. That's why when you see your kid hurting, you go, I would take that. Because actually, I'll give cred to Dave. I said, I would take my kid's pain. He said, yeah, but we're made of a metal that we could take it. But that comes with evolution, and that comes with growing up, because I would figure out how to deal with it.
Well, much like your metal, as a young man in a household where there was so much loss and so much tragedy and so much perseverance, I believe you've brought that metal to the world stage. And at a time where there's so much loss and so much tragedy and the need for perseverance, you're one of the guys that we look to as a beacon of that, as an example of that
It's
metal.
really sweet, man.
As a community, as a nation, as a world, but more importantly for me in this moment, as an individual and a friend. I can't tell you how much it's meant to me. This time that you spent with me has been an example of that, and I thank you. The world should thank you for just being
I'm just getting
Bob.
started. I swear, I'm gonna be more than Bob. I'll be Bob the Butcher.
There's nothing more that you need to be, Bob, because just being Bob, who you are, is what we need, and we appreciate you in this moment. So thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
To this day.
Wow. Oh, that was so nice. What a nice conversation.
To This Day is a Luminary original podcast. It's produced by Pilot Boy and Alex Casnoff for Salt Audio. Executive produced by Dave Chappelle and me, Radio Rahim. Most importantly, I'd like to thank my mom. You may know her as Dr. Rita Muhammad, without whom none of this is possible.
Original audio production, music and sound design by Salt. Executive produced by Pilot Boy. Executive produced by Noah Gersh, Jamie Schefman, Nick Panama, and Kenzi Wilbur. Creative producer, Alex Casnoff. Executive producer, Elliot O'Day. Head of production, Liz LeMay. Head of engineering, Jordan Galvan. Production manager, Allie Strobel. Post coordinator, Alice Bearn. Edited by Geoffrey Mutchnik. Mixed by Salt. Additional editing and sound design by Jasper Van Dijk and Noah Kowalski.